Subai was just a regular web novel writer trying to make a living with his keyboard. One day, his shameless editor tricked him into going on a so-called outdoor inspiration trip, but instead of inspiration, he found gravity and tumbled straight off a cliff. When he finally regained consciousness and forced his eyes open, the first thing he saw was a wild-looking woman and animal skins drooling over him like he was her next meal. Cold sweat dripped down his back, but he tried to stay calm, telling himself she was just a human and won't actually eat him. But then she casually pulled a bone dagger from her belt and started poking at his soft, delicate flesh, like she was sizing up dinner, all while muttering some strange language he couldn't understand. Thrashed in panic, a single thought screaming in his head. Did I just time travel and land straight on someone's barbecue menu? Just when Subai was mentally preparing to get reincarnated with a better fate, the wild woman suddenly slashed the ropes around his wrists. He stared at her suspiciously, trying to guess her next move. She just scoffed, wiped the drool from her mouth, muttered something incomprehensible again, and walked out without looking back. But as she was stepping outside, Subai caught a glimpse of horns on her head and a tail swaying behind her. His jaw nearly hit the floor. Wait, did I just end up in a whole other world? He took a deep breath trying to calm down. Since he wrote web novels for a living and had written at least 100 types of isekai deaths, and falling off a cliff wasn't even top 10. Once his panic faded, he started examining the room. The entire tent was made of brown hide with smoke stains darkening the ceiling. Animal bones were scattered on the floor along with a campfire pit that had just gone out. The place screamed prehistoric. He lifted the flap and stepped outside, and what he saw completely froze him in place. Dozens of similar high tents filled the clearing, at least 30 or so, and towering trees circled the camp like a natural wall. The people here looked straight out of a fantasy novel. Some wore skins, others leaves and vines, and a few were literally wrestling with weird birds and yellow-tailed foxes and green hats. And just when he thought it couldn't get weirder, he spotted humanoid wolves casually strolling upright near the tree line. Subai's mind went completely blank. Where the hell am I? Did I respawn in a cursed survival game? But then things got freaky as he got approached by a towering man with two black horns jutted out his forehead. His grin revealed a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, and his brown eyes had a beastly glint. The man scanned Subai from head to toe, then launched into another round of that incomprehensible alien chatter. Just then, the wild girl from before came bouncing over and joyfully called him her father. The man immediately straightened his face and snapped, "Address me as chief in front of outsiders." As the two of them kept chatting in a language that sounded like fantasy gibberish, Subai clutched his forehead. Our fool kept on staring at both of them in confusion. Great. Language barrier unlocked. Did I seriously land in some prehistoric tribe simulator? Seeing him making that stupid face, the girl couldn't help but wonder, why'd he go silent all of a sudden, and did her father scare him? Stupid. The man, curious about his identity, pointed out that he had very smooth skin, which meant he was probably not from the wastelands, and concluded that he might be a runaway from a major tribe and decides to take him to the shaman. Without warning, the girl shoved Subai forward, steering him like a lost lamb towards some unknown destination. He didn't resist. Instead, he used the moment to quietly scan his surroundings. The deeper they went into the camp, the taller and grander the tents became. Some even had wooden frames, clearly the VIP section. The crowd were just as amazed to see him as he was to see them. Since this was their first time seeing someone without horns, tail, or wings, Subai's spine tingled. What kind of cursed fantasy world did I end up in? Am I livestock or what? His brain spun into overdrive trying to think of an escape route. But there was no system ding, no cheat menu popping up, just pure survival mode. After a few minutes of walking, they stopped in front of a colossal high tent guarded by two warriors holding bone staffs. From within the tent, our boy heard voices of some individuals discussing about the health of their shaman. Apparently, he was too old and didn't have enough time left, and the problem was he had no heir to succeed him. And even after testing the whole tribe, they weren't able to find a single individual with any magic talents. And if this continued, their tribe was sure to perish, and all of them will end up as outcasts. Inside the tent, a group of furries gathered around the shaman. One of them spoke up reminding the others about the outcast they had found 3 days ago, someone who still hadn't been tested. He asked if the child should be given a chance. After a moment of silence, the shaman gave a firm order. "Bring the child to me." Upon entering the tent, Subai immediately realized that the man before him was the leader of the tribe. But he couldn't help but wonder why would someone of such status invite someone like him here. He had no choice but to go along with it, so he slowly began approaching the man. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Trusting his instincts and that crafty mind of his, he quietly decided, if things went south, he'd take the old geezer hostage to try and escape this place. With that, he silently sat face to face with the old man. And before he could process anything, the eyes of the shaman started glowing a bright blue light. And before you knew it, Tsume felt his entire body freeze. It was as if his soul had been ripped from his flesh, and the next thing he knew, he was falling, plunging into an endless pit of nothingness. But in that vast sea of emptiness, he saw a bright flame appearing in front of him. As he was still in the middle of processing everything, the old man suddenly appeared in front of him once more, asking if he was able to see that thing. Subai was scared shitless with everything going on. But at least now he was able to understand what the old man was saying. So he asked, what did he do to him? The old man explained that this place existed deep within Tsumei's soul, and here, words weren't necessary to communicate. And once again, he asked the boy, what do you see in front of you? Tsumei was still struggling to grasp what was happening, but for now, Tsub told the old man he could see something inside the flame. It looked like a dragon or maybe a snake. With that, Tsubei opened his eyes once more in the real world and found the old man pointing his staff toward him, informing everyone that this boy would be a part of their village from here on out and would be acting as the next generation of magicians. Before Tsubei could process any of that, the whole room erupted in cheers. With this, the future of their tribe was secure. Meanwhile, Tsubei was still confused with the whole situation. But at least now, he was able to understand what these strange-looking people were saying, and that was a huge step for him. Before he knew it, he was being dragged around the village by the strange girl, and the news of him being their new shaman had spread all around the village. Some people were still skeptical if it was a good idea to let an outsider like this person join the tribe, but others were overjoyed that they finally managed to find the next generation sorcerer. And now their totem's tribe had a chance of survival. Meanwhile, our boy, who was overwhelmed by everything, asked the girl if they were sure it was a good idea to choose someone like him as the shaman since it was a very big responsibility and he was a total stranger in their tribe. That seemed to have angered the girl since it was a great honor to be selected by the great sorcerer as his successor, and no one had any doubts regarding his decision. After that, she finally introduces herself to our boy as Yanhwa, and beaming with pride tells our boy that from today on, she will be the one in charge of him so he can ask her anything. Seeing her eyes sparkling with please praise me energy, Subai gave in and asked her about her tribe. The girl explained that her tribe was called the Yanlong tribe, and the flaming dragon on their banner was their sacred totem, also known as a Yanlong. However, she quickly added that she couldn't share anything more about the totem as it was a closely guarded village secret. As she finished speaking, Subai suddenly recalled the flaming dragon he had seen in that strange soul realm just before being chosen as the shaman. Could it be the same one? He wasn't sure, but decided not to press her further. Instead, he shifted the topic asking about the village chief and why even he had to follow the sorcerer's instructions. The girl was taken aback by such a basic question and wondered what kind of rock has this guy been living under all this time. But still, since she promised she would answer his questions, she explained that a sorcerer is the strongest person in their tribe. Without him, the entire Yanlong tribe would be wiped out. After him came her father, the chieftain, followed by the captain and the hunter. Below them were the totem soldiers, the reserve soldiers, and finally, commoners. Subai felt a bit overwhelmed with all this information and also pointed out that they have too many positions for such a small tribe. To that, the girl's head lowered as if she was trying to hide her emotions from him. She informed our boy that it wasn't always like this. Before this, they used to live in their ancestral lands, which were fertile, and they didn't have to worry about water or food. Back then, they were a large tribe of 300 people with 65 soldiers in a single hunting group. But half a year ago, all that changed when they became the target of a black snake tribe. They attacked their hunting grounds and many people lost their lives in that battle. They were forced to leave their ancestral lands and migrated to this place. Unable to contain her emotions after recalling that painful memory, her eyes started to well up as she tells Tsubei that this was the reason she wanted to become stronger so she can save her comrades who were taken captive and restore their ancestral lands. The story fast forwards and both of them resumed their tour around the village with Yanhua patiently explaining everything along the way. But the deeper they went, the more Subai began to understand the harsh reality these people lived in. They barely had enough to eat. Most villagers looked pale and thin from prolonged hunger. The living conditions were even worse. Many areas were poorly maintained and easily contaminated. Subai realized that if a pandemic were to break out in a place like this, it could wipe out the entire village. All of it was too much for Subai's mind to process. He began scratching his head, clearly overwhelmed, trying to figure out where he was even supposed to start. Yanhua noticed his uneasy behavior and glanced at him with concern, silently wondering what could be going through his head. But in the middle of all his panicking, Tsubei accidentally triggered the system that had been granted to him upon arriving in this world. As a novelist, he had half expected something like this to happen. He was just surprised it had taken this long to show up. Still, that wasn't the most important thing on his mind right now. Without wasting any time, he commanded the system to show him all its functions and the thing opened up a calendar in front of him after which he sees some notification. At the moment, this was the only function unlocked. The system explained that by checking in daily, he would receive a random newbie help pack. Each check-in also came with a 1% chance of receiving an intermediate assistance plan and a rare 0.1% chance of obtaining a premium assistance package. In addition, monthly check-ins guaranteed a mid-level assistance reward, while a full year of consistent check-ins would unlock a guaranteed premium assistance plan. This wasn't very helpful in his current situation since according to the system, he'd only receive 3 major help packages per year, and he didn't have that kind of time. If things continued like this, the entire village would starve to death long before his next reward arrived. Turning toward Yanhua, he saw her still busy explaining how the tribe functioned. But Tsubai was lost in his own thoughts, occasionally nodding without really hearing a word. It didn't take long for Yanhua to notice. Frustrated, she suddenly snapped since she gave up her training time to brief him on the state of the tribe, and he wasn't even paying attention. Our boy apologizes to the girl, telling her his head was a bit dizzy after walking for so long. Yanhua pouted, clearly still annoyed, but she let it go. She knew he had been unconscious for 3 whole days. It was only natural he wasn't at full strength yet, so she decided to end their tour here for the day and told our boy to follow her. She will show him where he would be living from here on. Eventually, they arrived outside a massive hut, and upon entering the place, Yanhua sat on the ground and our boy started inspecting the whole place. He asked if this was where he would be staying for now, and for some reason, Yanhua's voice dropped as she told him he was correct. And our boy, who had a long stressful day, finally felt like he could relax. And without a second thought, he jumped right into the bed. Yanhua instinctively tried to stop him, but then just sighed and let it go. But the weirdo, out of nowhere, started sniffing the bed and with a cheerful tone tells Yanhua that he liked the smell of the bed. But as he opened up his eyes, he saw Yanhua midair launching straight at him, yelling, telling him not to do that. Confused, our boy asked for the reason. And with a stuttering voice, Yanhua informed him that this was her room. After some time, Tsubai sat silently processing everything. Yanhua had just invited him to live in her house, which meant the two of them would be living together from now on. While thinking, his eyes ran over her figure as he mumbled that even though she had horns on her head, her figure was still top-notch. Seeing him staring at her like that, Yanhua was flustered, telling him it wasn't her idea to keep him here and told him she was going on patrol duty for tonight and warned him not to touch her stuff while she was gone. Without waiting for a reply, she made her way to the door, but paused just before leaving, warning Subway that she meant it. If she finds so much as a hair out of place, she'd give him the beating of a lifetime. After she was gone, our boy with a swollen cheek couldn't help but chuckle since she appeared so mature but was so easily embarrassed. But turning towards the main issue, he opened up his system interface and wasting no time, he checks in for the first time. As soon as he did that, another system interface opened up in front of him, congratulating him on obtaining an intermediate assistance package, which was a healing skill. Tsubai was genuinely surprised. Getting an intermediate assistance package was a big deal, and he had received it on his very first day. Fearing that it might get to his head, the system informs him that the reason he had unlocked this reward was because it was his first time opening a package. What caught his attention even more was the skill itself. It was marked as level 1. That meant it could be leveled up. But the problem was Tsubei had no idea how to level up a skill. Thankfully, the system responded with a prompt explaining that he needed to increase his skill's proficiency in order to level it up. Right after, it opened his attribute panel displaying his current stats. One glance was enough to make him cringe. Looking at the condition of his body, Tsubei couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He was ridiculously weak, so weak that living among these primitive people, he might actually drop dead at any moment. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, the chieftain and the shaman were both discussing about Tsubai, and Janku was a bit worried since he wasn't able to find any leads that might point him to the origins of Tsubai and was worried that he could be a spy from another village. But the shaman reminded him they have already run out of time and he was the only one with talent in their tribe. But during their conversation, the shaman's condition suddenly worsened and he started coughing violently. Looking at his blooded hand, he reminded Yank they didn't have any other choice since he will only be able to hold out for a few more days. Yank also knew that this child was their only hope for survival now. Seeing his gloomy expression, the shaman assured him not to think too much about it since there were more important things they needed to focus on right now and instructed him to hold the inheritance ceremony in 3 days. That request startled Yank. He felt they were rushing things too much and he was still concerned. What if Tsubai really was from the Black Snake tribe? But the shaman calmly reassured him, reminding him that the Black Snake tribe could never have raised a child so clean, soft, and without the stench of blood. More importantly, he had seen the boy's soul. There was no malice in it. It was clear, like a flowing river untouched by dirt, which led him to suspect that he could be from the legendary tribe from the stories. So they needed to protect this child no matter what. Listening to the wise words of the shaman, Janko had no other choice but to agree. But before he left, he was stopped by the shaman once again, and upon asking the reason, he hears him reminding him that the descendants of a wizard often carry extraordinary talent. If possible, it would be best for the tribe to produce many generations of wizards from that boy. Yank knew exactly what he meant. He gave a firm nod and assured the shaman not to worry. He was already well aware of that. Arriving outside the tent, he was surprised to find Manhwa, who was eavesdropping on their conversation. Seeing her there, Yank wasn't very pleased and asked what was she doing. And the girl, knowing she was busted, tried to play dumb, telling him she was just passing by here while patrolling. Wasting no time, she started leaving but was stopped by the chieftain who had an important task for her. Hearing those words, her eyes lit up since this was the first time he came to her with such a request, and she instantly agreed to fulfill it. Seeing her so enthusiastic without even waiting to hear what he had to say, he couldn't help but think to himself just how stupid she was. But ignoring that, he got straight to the point, telling her she needed to marry that wizard boy and have as many children with him as possible. The request left the girl both flustered and stunned, and she sat there, speechless, completely unsure how to even respond. In the next instant, she sprang to her feet, her face red with frustration. She reminded him what she had already told him before. She would only marry a man who could defeat her in combat, but this man was too skinny and soft, and there was no way he would be able to beat her. Seeing her acting like a child, the man also snapped back at her, asking how many people of her age group were there in the tribe who could beat her. Putting up his dad face, he reminded her that she was already 19, and it was about time she started thinking about having children of her own. But Yanuel wasn't listening and started walking away since she still needed to get stronger and take revenge from the ones who drove them away from their ancestral lines. But before leaving, she gives Yankio a parting gift, telling him if he wanted grandkids so badly, he can go and marry him himself. With that, she started springing away with Yankio chasing after her to teach her a lesson. Meanwhile, back inside the tent, the shaman sat quietly, listening to the exchange between father and daughter with a faint smile of amusement. He wished he had more time to watch her grow to see how far she would go. But deep down, he knew that wasn't possible. But even at his condition, the only thing in his mind was the future of their next generation. The story fast forwards and it was officially the second day of our hero in this new world. Getting out of bed, he was feeling miserable since he wasn't able to get any sleep last night because the weather was so cold. Upon examining the hut, he noticed large holes on the sides which were letting the cold wind enter the place. As he was crawling on the ground like an insect, he gets approached by Manhwa. Seeing her standing next to him, Sabai asks if they can go get some straws to fix the tent since he wasn't able to get any sleep last night because of the cold. But the girl was lost in her own world, recalling the last night's conversation with her father. And seeing his face once again, she started picturing her whole life with him and their kid, and that scares her so much. And without thinking, she starts smashing our poor fool's back, who lay there groaning in pain, helpless under her random, relentless blows. After she had calmed down, our boy wonders if asking for straws was a crime in this place and wipes the blood from his face. Meanwhile, Manhwa, who is now somewhat back to her senses, asked why did he need straws for and sees the poor insect on the ground pointing towards the holes in the hut that he wanted to cover up. Realizing that she might have overreacted, she apologized to our boy and told him to follow her. But after what just happened, Subai was hesitant. This girl was genuinely starting to scare him, but he had no other choice since he didn't want to freeze to death. So he started following her to get the straws to fix the hut. But while walking, he notices something and stops. He saw some kids curled up outside in the cold, and all they had to cover themselves up was a shabby-looking roof and nothing else. Seeing the poor things, our boy couldn't help but ask about their condition. Manhwa glanced over and calmly explained that most people in their tribe didn't even have proper homes. Animal fur was too valuable and they weren't strong enough to hunt large beasts on their own. So many were forced to sleep wherever they could with whatever scraps they had, but she assured him not to worry about that problem since he was far more important compared to anyone in the village. After some time, both of them were seen walking back with a bunch of straws in hand. But this wasn't for the hut, but for the kids sleeping in the cold. Man, this guy just won my heart with this. Seeing him do that, Manhwa couldn't help but ask, why are you giving this to them? You're a sorcerer now. You're far more important than the rest of them. And here's our boy saying that they were just as equally important. Seeing his expression, Manhwa fell silent since she had realized that he wasn't just saying it to sound nice. He meant every word. Her views on him slowly started to change since he wasn't the kind of person she had imagined at all. In another place, a voice was heard informing the whole village that their hunting squad was back. Hearing the announcement, the whole village started gathering at the village entrance to welcome back their warriors. It was a bunch of furries led by one with the head of a lion who had a massive boar on his back. Seeing the sight, the whole village were thrilled since this meant their kids weren't going to go hungry anymore. Seeing the sight, Subai asked Yanghua if there was a division of rations in their tribe. She explained there was, especially when it came to meat. Most of it was distributed among the totem warriors and a small portion was given to reservists and children. That confused Subai since she didn't even mention any old people. Yanghua looked away for a moment before answering, saying that they can only eat it occasionally. Usually, they just pick wild fruits to fill their stomachs. And after a brief pause, she added, but it's usually not enough to fill them. She went on to explain that only half of the prey was eaten fresh. The rest had to be dried and preserved for times when the hunting team couldn't bring anything back. After she was done explaining, Subai realizes that their food sources entirely depended on the small number of soldiers that go out for hunting. Recalling his knowledge from previous life, he asked if they didn't try raising animals or farming. If you stock up and breed them, it could help stabilize the village's food reserves. But to his surprise, Yanghua looked completely lost. Farming was a foreign concept to her. And as for raising animals, she shook her head. We can't even feed ourselves properly, she said. How would we take care of animals? Subai was completely dumbfounded by her answer, but he chose not to press the issue any further. Even if he did try raising pigs for meat, he had a feeling they'd just sneak in and slaughter them at midnight before he even had the chance to protect them. As they were busy chatting, Subai gets approached by the lion man who was curious about him since this was his first time seeing him in their village. And after examining his scrawny frame for a bunch of seconds, a thought snaps in his head, and he wonders if this person could really be the one, thinking that he places the boar to the side to greet him properly. And with all the respect he carried as a warrior of the Yanlong tribe, he bows in front of both Subai and Yanghua, asking if he was the man she chose to be her husband. The sudden question completely shocked Yanghua. Her face turned red, she quickly corrected him, saying he was Shaman's successor. The moment they heard the news, a spark lit up in the eyes of the warriors. They erupted into cheers, rallying around Suba with renewed energy. To them, he was the hope for the village's future. As a gesture of respect, the warriors began laying their hunted game before Subai, and Subai stood there stiff and overwhelmed, completely unsure how to respond to the sudden flood of admiration. Had never been treated like this before, and for the life of him, he couldn't figure out what he was supposed to say or do. Turning towards Yanghua, he asked if these guys were always this friendly towards their guests. And here's the girl explaining that he was a big deal in their village since he was the future sorcerer, which is why everyone was acting in such a way towards him. As he stood there getting showered with gifts by the warriors, Subai was suddenly approached by the cutest little kid he had ever seen. With glittering eyes and a big innocent smile stretched across his face, the boy held up a small catch in his tiny hands. Nothing impressive, but offered with pride. Big brother, he beamed. I caught this. I want to share it with you too. The sight of the child's genuine excitement and pure heart made Subai's chest tighten a little. He couldn't help but feel a pain of guilt. He was being treated so differently, put on a pedestal just because he'd been chosen as the next sorcerer, while everyone else, including kids like this, had to fight for every scrap. After a while, both of them were seen sitting quietly by a bonfire where Yanghua, with a mix of curiosity and confusion, asked Subai the reason for not accepting the meat that boy gave him, since it was an honor for him to offer meat to the sorcerer. And here's our boy explaining that it wasn't something to be proud of since that child was also a human. Maybe our boy forgot he wasn't on Earth anymore and he was the only human on that planet, but, well, it is what it is. By then, the meat was almost done roasting, and Yanghua was drooling seeing the massive chunk of meat in Subai's hand. And just as he was about to take a bite, he hears the poor girl's stomach grumbling. Realizing that she hadn't eaten anything yet, our boy offered her some food. But the girl, controlling herself with every fiber of her being, somehow refuses the offer, though it was clear the temptation was already getting to her. The smell alone was enough to make her mouth water, and her resolve began to crack. At that point, even the meat seemed to be calling out to her, and she couldn't help but wonder if she should just accept the generous offer. Seeing her expressions, our boy knew she wanted it but wasn't accepting it because of the shame and pride. So he told her to just take one bite. Hearing those words, she finally gave in to temptation and prepared to take a bite out of the thing. And before our boy knew it, he was standing face to face with the colossal titan, ready to devour him along with the piece of meat. And boom, a loud crunch filled up the whole place, followed by a messy explosion of saliva that sprayed all over Subai's stunned face. Looking at what was left in her hands, Subai was completely speechless. She hadn't just taken a bite. She had gone full beast mode. The chunk of meat was stripped clean, bitten all the way down to the bone like it had been through a wild animal attack. But, hey, at least the girl was happy, and in the end, that was all that mattered. After that, Subai finally resumed eating himself and noticed that the meat was a bit tougher compared to what he was used to eating and wished he had some salt to add some flavor to the thing. Hearing his words, Yanghua started reaching into her pouch and brought out a wooden tube. Opening the lid, our boy saw that it contained salt and asked why was she carrying something like this around with her. Yanghua explained that this was all the salt left in the entire village, something she'd been quietly saving up over time. She told him that every totem warrior was required to consume salt to maintain their strength, but since she was just a reserve, it didn't matter as much. Hearing her words, Tsubai suddenly realized just how valuable salt was in this primitive world. Unlike the modern life he came from, where something like salt could be picked up at any supermarket for next to nothing, here, it was rare, essential, and something people had to save up over time. That simple handful she offered carried far more weight than he first thought. So he handed it back to her with an excuse that he wanted to eat something tasteless right now. But at that time, another thought was going through his head as he wondered what he should do next, since this tribe was arguably a poor village, and solving all these problems according to the current situation wasn't going to be easy. So to get a better understanding, Tsubai asked Yanghua about the salt, how they got it, and where it came from. She explained that every 15 days, a group of hunters from their village would travel out to a nearby tribe where a trading market was held. Tribes from all over the region gathered there, bringing whatever goods they had to offer. It was the only place they could buy things like salt, tools, or preserve food, anything their village couldn't produce on its own. That caught Tsumei's attention. If there was a place where tribes gathered and goods were exchanged, it would be the perfect opportunity for him to learn more about this world. Curious, he asked how long it would take to reach the next market. Yang Yu didn't hesitate and told him it was a 10 days walk. The answer made him pause. 10 days just to get there. That only confirmed how isolated and far behind this village really was. Before they could continue their conversation, both of them got approached by another individual. Turning towards the man, they saw it was Yunku, who came there looking for our boy since the sorcerer was calling for him. Eventually, they arrived outside the sorcerer's hut. The air around the place felt heavy, almost gloomy, and Tsubei couldn't help but sense something was off. When he asked about it, Yankyu quietly explained that these were the final moments of the great sorcerer's life and that he had been chosen to stay by his side during this time. Meanwhile, the remaining warriors of the tribe had also gathered outside the hut, standing in solemn silence to pay their respects to the man who had spent his entire life protecting and guiding them. As the scene grew quiet, a gentle flashback played out, showing the sorcerer, in his younger days, strong and full of life. Back then, the warriors now standing tall were just children, clumsy and unsure. And it was him, the great sorcerer, who had looked after them, taught them, and watched them grow into the tribe's finest. Inside the hut, Tsubai sat face to face with the old sorcerer. The sorcerer, his voice calm but faint, informed him that tomorrow would be his inheritance ceremony. But that wasn't the only reason he had called him there tonight. With a serious look in his eyes, he told Tsubai that this night was meant for something more important. He was going to teach him everything he needed to know to carry the title of sorcerer. Tsubai, realizing the weight of the moment, instantly tensed up. But in typical fashion, the very next second, he tried to play it cool, only to end up looking like an idiot when the old sorcerer asked if he even knew what a sorcerer was. Seeing his blank expression, the sorcerer began to explain. A sorcerer is more than just someone who wields power, he said. He is the one who protects the tribe, inherits its future, and guides its direction. He carries the hopes of every generation and ensures the flame of the tribe never goes out. Only by doing all this one can be worthy of being called a sorcerer. He explained that in this world, the totem power was the foundation of a tribe, and each tribe possessed a different totem. And a sorcerer is the only one with the power to control the power of the totem and activate its mark in the warrior's blood. Curious, our boy asked about the totem warriors. The old man explained that these are the strongest warriors in the tribe, second only to the sorcerer. Each one of them carries great potential, their bodies brimming with powerful chi and blood. But without a sorcerer, that strength can never truly evolve. No matter how powerful they are, they require the totem mark, a gift only a sorcerer can grant to guide and awaken the deeper power within them. That's why the sorcerer's presence isn't just symbolic. It's essential for the tribe's survival. In simpler terms, the old man explained that a sorcerer has the ability to activate a warrior's hidden potential, allowing them to surpass ordinary people. He went on to say that everyone in this world carries the power of blood within them. And with the right training and guidance, but their strength varies based on the amount of chi and blood they possess. That's why they are divided into different ranks, ordinary soldiers and totem warriors. Once someone gathers enough blood strength, they can be promoted through a special ritual conducted by the sorcerer. He explained that under normal circumstances, reserve soldiers were strong enough to handle most of the beasts around the village. But out there in the wider world, there were creatures far more powerful, monsters that even the bravest warriors of their tribe could never hope to defeat without awakening their full potential. And only the strongest totem warriors possessed the strength to face these beasts, and the tribe's strength entirely depended on the number of such warriors. After hearing the explanation, Tsubai finally began to understand just how important sorcerers were in this dangerous primitive society. But the old man wasn't done yet. With a serious look, he told Subai that training warriors was only one part of a sorcerer's duty. They were also responsible for creating something called a domino sorcerer, a special kind of sorcerer capable of passing on their power and knowledge more efficiently. As he spoke, the old man slowly opened a folded piece of animal pelt, revealing a collection of rare materials and several worn scrolls. These, he explained, were the essential components and instructions needed to create a domino sorcerer. Curious, Subai picked up one of the scrolls to see what was written inside. But the moment his eyes scanned the strange markings, he realized he couldn't understand a single word. The writing didn't look like any language he knew, and the more he stared at it, the more his head started to spin. Suddenly, the scroll began to glow faintly, and strange symbols started shifting across the surface. A sharp wave of dizziness hit him out of nowhere, and without thinking twice, he quickly dropped the scroll back. Seeing Subai's reaction, the old man let out a quiet chuckle and explained, "Those texts aren't something just anyone can read. They are sealed with ancient sorcery. Only after you complete the inheritance ceremony will your soul be attuned to their power. Then and only then will you be able to understand what's written inside." Holding up a small rough-looking stone, the old man explained, "This is a domino sorcerer, which is engraved with ancient magic. As long as one possesses enough magical power, he can activate it. Once awakened, it can store and pass down knowledge, abilities, and even spiritual imprints to future sorcerers." He went on to explain that there were many kinds of magic, poison techniques, blessing techniques, and more. Each sorcerer specialized in different areas depending on their affinity and training. Hearing this, Subai's eyes lit up with excitement. The idea of mastering all these abilities thrilled him, and he eagerly asked, "What kind of abilities did you have?" The old man replied, "I'm most skilled in healing and blessings. As for the others, those I cannot share with anyone." Subai quickly realized why the old man kept some of his abilities secret. Not all of his sorcerer's powers could be made public. If others knew too much, it would make him an easy target. Seeing how fast he caught on, the old sorcerer gave him an approving nod since he was quick to understand. He explains that a sorcerer may be admired and respected by the tribe, but that admiration comes with danger. Outside these walls, there are many who see us as threats or opportunities. He urged Subai, "Guard these scrolls with your life. They are not just old writings. They are our tribe's greatest secret, the legacy of generations. If they fall into the wrong hands, everything our people have built could be lost." Subai nodded solemnly, feeling the gravity of the moment. "I promise," he said firmly, "I'll guard these secrets with my life." But out of nowhere, the old man's condition suddenly worsened. His body trembled, and he started coughing up blood. The sight panicked our boy, and without thinking, he rushed over and activated his healing ability, hoping to do something. But to his disappointment, the system popped up a cold message, "Healing ineffective." No proficiency increased. The old man knew there was no magic that was powerful enough to heal his injuries. So he tells Subai not to waste his energy on him. Subai also realized that with his current strength, there was nothing he could do for the old man, and he couldn't help but wonder what he should do. Just then, he heard the frail voice of the sorcerer, wishing he had more time to witness the surprises Subai would bring to the world. But even in this fragile state, the old man hadn't forgotten his duty and asked Subai to help him up, saying he still had much to teach in the little time he had left. The story fast-forwards to the next morning. The old man had spent the entire night passing down everything he could, sharing his wisdom, secrets, and responsibilities. And after they were ready, the two of them slowly made their way outside the hut because today was the day of the inheritance ceremony. Eventually, they arrived at the designated spot where the entire village had gathered to witness the birth of their next sorcerer. Without wasting any time, Subai knelt before the old man who immediately began the ceremony. He called upon all the totem warriors to offer their blood to the next sorcerer. One by one, the warriors made small cuts on their hands, and to everyone's awe, the blood began to float and gather in front of the old man. Slowly, it started forming into the shape of the village's sacred totem. Then without warning, the blood-crafted totem lunged towards Subai. And as it merged into his body, Subai felt a surge of overwhelming power rushing through him. After the preparations were complete, the old man placed 2 fingers on his forehead, initiating the transfer of his inheritance, a legacy that held the sorcerer's history and the secrets of the totem's wealth. The moment their contact was made, Sabri felt a familiar sensation, the same one he experienced the first time he met the sorcerer. And before he knew it, his consciousness was pulled away from reality, finding himself once again in that vast empty plane of nothingness. The story shifts and we see 2 individuals making their way through the rough plains in order to reach the ancestral lands. At the back was a child, and I assume this is the same old man from all those years ago. As night falls, the scene changes again. The same child is now seen alone under the dark sky calling out to the totem, seeking its guidance to glimpse the future of his tribe. Out of nowhere, a massive surge of energy was witnessed from a distance by some other individuals. Seeing the sight, a woman rushed over to check on the child and was horrified to discover how many doses of divination potion he had consumed. His condition was dire and the surrounding villagers were certain he wouldn't make it through the night. But even in that broken state, the child smiled faintly, telling the woman that he had seen a glimpse of their future. Hearing those words, the woman gently told him never to reveal what he saw to anyone. That vision was his alone. She instructed him not to rely on predictions of the future, but to carry that memory deep within his heart and never forget it. Because the future was always uncertain, but she was certain of one thing, that he will bring a future for the tribe in which no one will be hungry and cold anymore. In that vision, the child had seen an individual, a beacon of hope for them all. After that day, time moved on. The boy grew up into a fine young man, taking care of the tribe while still holding on to the vision he had, waiting for that person to finally appear. On his journey, he made friends, lost people, faced trials. And every now and then when things got quiet, he found himself thinking about that person, wondering when he would arrive, wondering if he ever would, but he never came. Years turned into decades, and the boy eventually became an old man. Even then, he never let go of that hope. He kept telling himself he just needed to be strong a little longer, just long enough to pass on the tribe's future to the one from his vision. Along the way, he earned a name for himself, became known as the strongest sorcerer of his generation in the Yanlong tribe. But time catches up with everyone. His power stayed strong, but his body, not so much. Then one day, the tribe was attacked by the Blacksnake tribe. He gave it everything he had like he always did, but this time his body couldn't keep up. Still, he didn't let himself fall. Deep down, he believed the one he had waited for all his life was going to come. And finally, that day came. A young man stepped into his hut. The moment he saw him, he didn't need to ask a single question. He just knew this was the one he'd waited for all these years. Back in the present, Subai's eyes were filled up with tears after seeing the struggles that boy had to endure waiting for him. He apologized for taking so long to arrive, but the man simply told him not to cry. He was handing over their future to him, and he needed to take care of everything from here on out. And those were the final words that came from his mouth, and Subai saw his frail body collapsing to the ground. At that moment, Subai didn't see a powerful sorcerer. He didn't see a legend. All he saw was a tired little boy who had given up everything for the future. The story shifts back to our hero who was slowly regaining consciousness in the hut where he had been brought after fainting. But for some reason, he felt as though all the knowledge surrounding totems had been transferred directly into his mind during the ritual. Not just that, his vision had also improved significantly. Despite being nearsighted before, he could now see everything clearly. And along with that, he felt a noticeable surge in strength throughout his body. So to confirm, he opened up his status window and saw his stats had improved drastically, with most of the stats going more than double with sprint increasing fold. With this newfound strength, he flexes his scrawny arms, feeling the surge of power going through them. But for some reason, his magic power and spirit remained unchanged, so he decided to ask the system about it. The system informed him that while magic power is derived from spiritual power, any skills obtained from system packs would only consume his spirit strength directly. Hearing that, he decided to claim his daily rewards. A flood of system notifications popped up in front of him, congratulating him on receiving a fruit knife and a book on linen textile crafting. Staring at the kitchen knife, our boy couldn't help but wonder if the system was trolling him. At this rate, he was pretty sure it was only a matter of time before it handed him a pack of toilet paper. But surprisingly, the ebook turned out to be useful. It contained the complete history of Chinese linen textiles from ancient techniques to modern applications. Considering most people in the tribe still wore rough animal skins, he realized he might actually be able to introduce sackcloth clothing in the future, a major upgrade for them. As he was still going through the system interface, he hears a voice outside the hut asking if he was awake. Upon seeing who it was, he saw Yenku, who was there to pick him up so he could be transferred to the main tent. This confuses Subi since that was where the sorcerer resided. That is when Yonku informed him that the sorcerer passed away while he was unconscious and now the tribe required his guidance since he was his successor. That saddened Subi since he wasn't there in his final moments and asked about his body. The Lion Man informed him that they had already cremated the sorcerer's body following the old man's final wishes, and showing him something in his hand informed him that this was all that remained of him. Subai instantly recognized the thing as a relic that surprises both men, as this was the first time they heard about such a thing. So Subai explained that according to legend, the person of infinite merit will have relics after cremation. So he decides that when all this is over and they regain the ancestral land, he will have a temple built in his honor. After some time, he was seen sitting inside the main tent, completely accepting his duty as the shaman of the tribe, and asked both of them about the villagers' situation and how much stock of meat they had. The Lion Man informed him that they barely had enough even for the totem warriors. And because of that, the rest of the tribe was going hungry, including the 6 reserve soldiers. That surprised Tsubei since they only had 6 reserve soldiers and even they weren't well fed. If another tribe decided to attack, they wouldn't be able to defend themselves. Yanko explains that originally there were 26, but many of them were captured by the Black Snake tribe during the migration, and by now they were probably executed or turned into slaves. Realizing how dangerous this other tribe was, Tsubei knew he needed to understand the situation better. So he asked about their village, how far it was and how long it would take for them to get here. But Yinku reassured him not to worry too much. That tribe wasn't likely to come attacking anytime soon. The land they lived in was barren, something the other tribe didn't care for anyway. The Lion Man explained that it took a whole day just to travel from the village to the hunting grounds and at least 3 more catch enough prey. Because of that, not too many people cared about this place. This was a confusing situation for our boy. He couldn't move the whole tribe to another location, not in their current condition, but staying meant slow starvation. And relying on just hunting wasn't an option anymore either. That was basically a death sentence. As he was thinking of a way to solve this problem, he recalled what Yanhua had told him earlier about the market. Thinking this may solve their problem of food, he asked both of them about linen and how valuable it was. The Lion Man explains that linen was very rare and only the big tribes had the resources to make it. Yankee went on to explain that they've been hoping to get more linen clothes, but after the migration, they didn't have much jerky left to buy any. And every time they visited the market of the Spotted Deer tribe, the linen would get snatched up as soon as it appeared. And even then, just 1 roll of linen cost 3 whole pieces of jerky. All this was too confusing for our boy since he didn't have a scale to check how much 1 piece of jerky weighed to know how valuable it was. Seeing the confused look on his face, Yanku came up with a brilliant idea to explain how much jerky they actually needed. Without wasting any time, he grabbed Changshi and used him as a stand-in, showing Tsubei with exaggerated gestures just how much meat they'd need to trade. Somehow, our boy actually understood. Turns out, they needed out a pound. But even then, Tsubei still didn't know how much linen they'd be trading for at that price. Luckily, Yankio had a solution for that too. Out of nowhere, he told Changshi to lie down on the floor with no other choice. The guy did as he was told. Then together, Yankio and Tsubei started marking out just how much linen they'd get in return. After that brilliant demonstration, our boy finally got it. A single 10-meter roll of linen cost up to 300 pounds of jerky, which was way overpriced, and that was exactly where he could start fixing their food problem. The story shifts to the totem warriors scanning the hunting grounds for something. They've been combing the plains for hours. And after searching for so long, some of them wondered why they were looking for grass instead of prey since meat was what they needed to survive. Out of nowhere, boom, a fist lands on top of his head, reminding him this was a direct order from the shaman himself and was related to the future of their tribe. Recalling their conversation, he remembered how shocked both of them were after hearing that their shaman knew how to make linen, which was something that alone could solve many of their problems. The scene shifts and we see our boy instructing both of them not to let this information get out of this place for now. Otherwise, there was a very high chance that their whole tribe might become a target. After which, he gave a direct order to Cheng that when he's out hunting, he used to look for a specific plant for him, which was a material needed to make linen fabric, and urged him to give it his all since solving the food problem in the village solely depended on his success. Recalling that day, Cheng Shu felt a fire light up inside him since he had been honored with such an important task, trusted not just as a warrior, but as someone who could change the tribe's future. So no matter what, he's going to see it through. The story shifts back to the village where Tsubei was thinking of his next move. Since they only had 15 days worth of rations left, and it would take 3 days for Changshi and his part to get back, which would only leave him 5 days to prepare the next stage of his plan. But there was also the possibility that Changshu won't be able to find the materials needed, so he needed to prepare for that possibility as well. Not only that, the technique for making linen was incredibly valuable. It wasn't something he could just hand out to anyone. Yet at the same time, he couldn't do it all on his own either. He needed someone to help him, someone he could actually trust, not just to follow instructions, but to keep a secret. Not just that, but he can't solve the other problems the tribe was facing all by himself, like drinking water and sanitation. All that was making his head hurt, and he started panicking, wondering what he should do. He slumped to the ground since he was just an ordinary novelist who in his own world wasn't even good at taking care of himself, and now he was made in charge of a whole tribe. As he was going through his thoughts, he heard Yanhua entering the tent to check up on him, asking if he was all right since she heard him screaming for some reason. And before he could say anything, the girl suddenly leaned in and pressed her forehead against his, checking if he caught a fever or something. That catches our boy completely off guard, and he instantly springs back, asking what was she doing snooping around his tent and eavesdropping. But Yanhua, with all the confidence in the world, informed him she didn't need to eavesdrop on him. She was listening to him openly. Since her father and the others were all out, she was left in charge of guarding his hut. But our boy, with a serious expression, asked if she was even reliable to guard someone like him. And before he could even blink, he was flat on the ground in a chokehold as Yanhua reminded him she was the strongest amongst the reserve soldiers, which was far more reliable than a sorcerer pulling his own hair. After some time, he was seen with his head on the stone table, asking Yanhua if every sorcerer in the past had to deal with so many trifles on his own. And the girl informed him he was the only one since every sorcerer in the past had an assistant. So he asked about the assistants of the previous sorcerer and why didn't they come to help him. And here's Yanhua informing him that all of them lost their lives while defending the sorcerer from the Black Serpent tribe. To that, Subai fell silent, realizing how much the tribe had to suffer after that attack. But still, he didn't have time to ponder in the past, so he asked Yanhua if she had someone in mind who could fill in the position of an assistant. Hearing that, the girl's expression started to change as Subai described the kind of person he was looking for, someone smart, hardworking, and capable of thinking both ideally and practically. After he was done explaining that to her, she leaned in a little closer and told him he was terrible at expressing his own opinions out loud because the person he was talking about was standing right in front of him. But our boy popped her bubble right away by reminding her that she wasn't any of those things to begin with. That angered Yanhua, but luckily, this time she didn't try to strangle him to death. Instead, she suggested that he choose a Miko instead. But Subai had no idea what this Miko was. So with a face red as a tomato, Yanhua quickly explained that a Miko was a woman who took care of the daily life of the sorcerer, handling cleaning, chores, housework, and helping pass on his instructions and so on. That was exactly what our boy needed. So he asked her if she knew of such a person to fill in the position, and here's Yanhua saying she does have someone in mind who can fill in that position. After some time, both of them were making their way to meet that person, but Yanhua was lost in her own thoughts. She recalled her conversation with her father who told her she was the one closest to Subari and suggested that she take on the role of a Mako for him. And when she showed hesitation, her father asked if she didn't like him. Yanhua told him she didn't hate him or anything and it was practically a dream of every girl in the tribe to become a Miko. But she couldn't do that as she still wanted to avenge everyone, so she would remain a totem warrior and kill the bastards of the Black Snake tribe. Back in the present, both of them had finally arrived at the location, and she pointed at a small hut in front of them, saying that is where the person lived. She asked if she should call her, but our boy refused right away. He needed to see for himself if this person really fit the role of his Miko. With that, he quietly approached the hut to peek inside. What he saw were 3 girls working on something, and among them was a healthy-looking fox girl who immediately caught his attention. He figured she had to be the one Yanhua was talking about. By then, Yanhua had also joined him and asked what did he think about her suggestion. Our boy thought she was beautiful but still looked too weak, and her tribal blood marks were also starting to fade away. Hearing his concerns, Yanhua assured him the girl was both diligent and kind, exactly the kind of person who could handle the role. She explained she was her Uncle Chang's niece and that she'd lost both her parents when she was just a child. Her aunt had raised her since then. And now that her aunt was pregnant, the girl had moved in to help out. She even refused to eat any of the food at home, choosing instead to make sure her aunt had enough to eat. That kind of maturity and selflessness at her age was rare, and it only made Subai more curious whether the girl really was everything Yanhua claimed. Inside the hut, they heard her aunt's gentle voice reminding her that she didn't have to stay here just for her sake. She mentioned that the tribe now had a young new sorcerer, and with her beauty, she should consider serving him. But the girl instantly brushed off the idea, her voice shaky as she told them she didn't deserve to be a Miko. But both of them could see through her. She didn't mean that. Everyone in the tribe knew more than anyone else ever since she was little. She'd always wanted to become the girl wasn't able to deny it, but she still tried to argue, saying Yanhua was the one more suited for the role. She even brought up the time when they were just kids, how Yanhua used to say that when she grew up, she wanted to become a Mako. And that surprises both of creeps eavesdropping on their conversation outside the hut, and they exchanged awkward glances, especially Yanhua. Flustered and furious, she snapped, bursting into the hut, asking why was she bringing something like that up so casually. The poor girl, completely startled seeing her appearing out of nowhere, asked if she was eavesdropping on her. But before Yanhua could answer, our heroes started entering the place, telling everyone they were just observing them. Realizing that even the great sorcerer had been listening to their conversation, the poor fox girl looked like her soul had left her body. She froze for a moment, eyes wide, and now all she wanted was a hole to disappear into. But our boy, clearly unfazed by her existential crisis and not even sparing a glance at her devastated expression, he casually mentioned that he had a few questions for her, speaking as if her entire world hadn't just collapsed moments ago, like it was just another routine job interview. With that, he asked the girl if she knew how to read and write, and that question shocked everyone since apparently that was a big deal in that time. Seeing their reactions, our boy already knew what her answer would be, but still turned to hear it from her own mouth. And just as he had thought, the girl was illiterate. Seeing her reaction to that question, he turned to Yanhua with a blank look and asked if he shouldn't have said that. Yanhua, a little caught off guard herself, explained that only the great tribes had their own written language, so no one in their village knew how to read or write. Realizing that Subai figured pushing any more questions would just be wasting breath. So instead, he got straight to the point and asked if she'd like to become his Miko, mentioning that Yanhua had spoken very highly of her. But the poor thing started muttering under all the pressure. Seeing her do that, Yanhua reminded her that she still needed to avenge everyone and become a totem warrior, so that only leaves her who is the most suitable for this position. But the girl, still not confident in her own abilities, showed hesitation in answering the question and softly admitted that she didn't think she was fit for the role, that she was too shy, too clumsy, and maybe not what a proper Mako should be. Hearing her answer, our boy didn't waste any more time on her and simply started walking away since he wasn't there to force this choice onto her. After some time, Yanhua was seen chasing after him, calling out for him to stop. She caught up clearly upset and demanded to know why he was acting so heartless and walked away like that when he knew full well how shy and uncertain Yuan was. And here's him say he never intended to leave things that way. Yu was perfect for the role, but it wasn't his place to decide for her. This was her choice to make. As he turned to walk away, he reminded Yanhua that opportunities aren't something others hand to you. You have to seize them yourself. If she truly wanted to become a Miko, she had to fight against her own doubts and take control of this chance before it slipped away. Just as he said those words, they noticed someone running toward them, calling out for them to stop. Seeing this, Yanhua's eyes lit up, thinking that it was Yuan. But to her disappointment, it was her aunt who had brought an appreciation gift for Subai. Seeing her generosity, he had no choice but to accept the gift, though he couldn't hide his disappointment that Yuan didn't show up herself. With a sigh, he asked Yanhua to escort him back to the hut. But just as he turned to leave, her aunt stopped him, telling him the girl was weak so she couldn't run very fast. Turning toward the direction the aunt had pointed, both he and Yanhua saw someone running toward them from a distance. It was none other than Yanhua, who looked exhausted after all that running. But still, gathering up her courage, she asked our boy to make her his Miko. After some time, the girl was seen sobbing like a child, tears streaming down her cheeks. Confused, Yoon asked why she was crying since she had already been accepted as a Miko. Yoon sniffled and said between hiccups that she was crying because she was happy. Before this day, she never even dared to dream of something like this, but now she was actually a Miko. Yanhua wiped her tears, telling her not to cry so much as she was starting to look like a little cat. Seeing the two of them together, our boy couldn't help but think how damn beautiful both of them were and told Yuan to wash her face first so they can start working. And that actually surprised the girl since water was way too scarce to be wasted on something like washing her face. That response left our boy completely stunned, and before they even realized, he had already leaped a few steps back, putting distance between them. With a horrified look on his face, he asked how often the people of this tribe even bathed. The question ticked Yanhua off a bit since to her, that was just common sense. So she replied with a straight face that they usually bathe once a year during the rainy season. That answer shattered something inside him. Thinking back to how close they've been this whole time, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of wild creature he had been sharing space with ever since arriving in this world. But at least now, he knew how bad the water condition was over there. And if he wanted to set up a clean sanitation system, he first needed a sufficient water source. And considering future developments, they needed to find a way to divert water to the village for irrigation. Thinking about all that, he asked where their closest water source was. Yanhua explained there was a small lake deep in the forest to the southeast, but a group of powerful beasts lived nearby, so only the totem warriors could safely approach it. All the drinking water in the tribe was fetched and carried back by them, just enough to keep everyone from dying of thirst. Saul, wanting to see for himself, he decided to head out and check the place to see if there was any way he could divert the water straight to the village. But before he could even take a single step, both girls jumped on him, yelling that a sorcerer must never leave the tribe, that it was way too dangerous out there. Seeing how serious they suddenly got kind of freaked Subai out. He didn't want to live under some kind of house arrest for the rest of his life, so he asked what kind of threats they were even talking about. That's when Yang explained that there were exiled totem warriors out there, the kind who targeted small tribes like theirs. They'd kidnapped the tribe's sorcerer and forced them into performing the inheritance ritual. She even told him about a recent case where one sorcerer was kidnapped, and by the time help arrived, he had already been executed. Because of that, there was now a rule. Unless it was absolutely necessary, a sorcerer was never allowed to lead the tribe. Realizing the situation, Sabai remembered that the tribe only had 11 totem warriors in total. 6 were out hunting, and the rest stayed behind to guard the tribe. With numbers that low, having them haul water back and forth every day was just a waste of manpower. Knowing that, Sabai made up his mind. If he wanted to fix their water problem once and for all, he had to take the risk and head out himself even if it meant breaking the rules. But the girls refused to let him lead the tribe. They reminded him that her father, along with the rest of the warriors, was out hunting, and there was no one strong enough around to escort him to the water source. Seeing no other way, Sabai had to use his authority as the sorcerer to order them both to escort him to that place, and to this, they had no other choice but to listen. Fast forward, the 3 of them were seen making their way through the forest. Neither of the girls looked happy about any of this, but they stayed optimistic. Yanhwa even pointed out that the forest was close to the tribe, and most of the dangerous beasts had probably already been dealt with by the totem warriors. As she was thinking all that, she failed to notice something hiding in the shadows, something that had spotted them and was now silently following all of them. Sabai was already starting to regret this decision. The deeper they went, the more exposed he felt. He knew they were easy prey like this, but Yanhwa assured him not to worry since they were near the gathering place where the warriors gathered to rest and recover, so they should be safe. But Yuying had spotted something in the dark and told both of them to get on guard. Turning towards the location, all 3 of them saw a dark figure running towards them in full speed. But before they could do anything, another dark figure appeared from behind them, startling Sabai, who realized they were surrounded from both sides. Out of nowhere, they saw a hand appearing in front of them from the dark. But as they looked closer, they saw both figures fighting each other. And Sabai recognized the female as the totem warrior who was with the previous sorcerer. Yanhua also realized it was her Aunt Hong who was so powerful that in a single motion, she slashed through the weapon of the man and even restricted his movements. But the man turned out to be another one of their tribe's warriors, so she lets go of him. But the man was clearly surprised to see the tribe's new sorcerer out here of all places and couldn't help but ask what he was doing in such a dangerous area. Our boy replied that he just wanted to check the water source for himself. Then flipping the question back at him, he asked why he was returning alone when he was supposed to be out with the others on the hunt. And here's the man informing all of them that Mai was injured and needed immediate treatment. Otherwise, he wasn't going to make it. The scene shifts to Mai and Yankyu, who were waiting for Black Fang to arrive at the sorcerer's dominoes, but Mai was in very critical condition. The wound on his stomach was too deep, and he had already lost a lot of blood. Seeing his condition, he knew he wouldn't be able to make it. So he told Yankyu to take everyone else and leave since he was in no condition to walk, and this smell of blood was going to attract many more dangerous beasts to their location. He instructs him to leave a portion of his beef jerky to his son since he was sure he will grow up to be a fine totem warrior. But Yanku refused to leave him like this and told him to wait for a little while longer as he was sure Black Fang will arrive at any time of help. As they were still talking, they noticed movement in nearby bushes. So wasting no time, the warrior standing guard throws his spear towards the location and the thing hits straight on Black Fang's shoulder. Damn, poor guy can't get a break. But, luckily, Hong manages to stop the spear before it reached the others. Seeing that he even brought the sorcerer with him in such a dangerous place, Yanku wasn't pleased at all, and he smashes Black Fang on the head, reminding him he asked him to bring the sorcerer's domino, not the sorcerer himself, and also scolds Yanghua and Yuying for not stopping him. But our boy, realizing he didn't have much time, instantly approached Mai to check his injuries and noticed that these injuries were far severe than he thought. And if it were a normal person, they wouldn't have been able to hold on for this long. So wasting no time, he started healing the wound, shocking the rest of them since this was their first time seeing someone use magic without chanting any incantations. And, also, it took at least 30 days for one to obtain this healing ability. But somehow, Sabai was using it skillfully without even any guidance. Seeing everything with his own 2 eyes, Janko realized that the old shaman was correct about this child. He possessed incredible talent. Meanwhile, Sabai was struggling healing such a massive wound since his healing skill was still at level 1. But somehow, he managed to pull it off and save Mai's life, who himself was shocked to see that there wasn't even a trace of a wound left on his body. But still, the loss of so much blood had left him weak. So Janku suggested that he head back to the tribe to rest, but he insisted to stay and fight along with them. Hearing his answer, Janko reminded him with his current condition, he wouldn't be able to defend himself. And if a dangerous monster appeared after the smell of his blood, they wouldn't be able to protect the sorcerer. Hearing those words, Mai realized he was correct, so he agreed to head back for now. Meanwhile, the girls were busy scolding our boy for acting so recklessly, stepping out of the village just to visit such a dangerous place. They informed him about the great beasts living in this forest, which only the strongest warriors can face. We are told that in this world, monsters are divided not just by strength, but by type. Mixed race beasts, pure race beasts, and inherited race beasts, each more terrifying than the last. To deal with them, the totem warriors themselves are ranked into 3 tiers to match the escalating threat. But in Subei's tribe, only Yangju, Changxi, Qinjiang, Maimeng, and Xiahong make up the first row. Yet even they struggle when facing the more dangerous monsters out there. The odds aren't exactly in their favor. Subei had also realized that his healing ability wasn't some all-powerful magic that could instantly mend bones or close wounds. Instead, it functioned more like traditional Chinese medicinal physical therapy. It didn't replace the body's natural healing. It just supported it, accelerating the process slightly. In other words, it was more of a helpful push than a miracle cure. After all that, Subei walked straight up to Yankyo and asked him to take him to the water source, since that was the reason he came out of the village in the first place. But Yankyo flat out refused, saying that place was far too dangerous even for the totem warriors. And if they were suddenly ambushed by a wild beast, they wouldn't be able to protect him. But Subei wasn't backing down. He knew if this water issue wasn't solved soon, the women, the children, and the elderly wouldn't last much longer. And without them, there was no future for the tribe. He told Yankyo straight up that he didn't care about his own safety. If risking his life was what it took to fix this water problem, then so be it. He wasn't about to sit around while the inheritance of the Yanlong tribe crumbled. Hearing his words, Yank remembered the previous sorcerer who also said the same thing to him when he was just a child. So he had no other choice but to agree to his demand and ordered everyone to get ready to escort Subei to the water source and defend him with their lives. Fast forward, Subei was already exhausted from all the walking. He was sweating like crazy even though his stats had doubled. Meanwhile, the others showed no signs of slowing down. They weren't even sweating, but still, he had to keep his dignity as a man in front of the girls. So he decided to play it cool and act tough, especially in front of Ewing. That didn't last long. When he saw her casually walking up the steep mountain while carrying supplies for everyone, his pride just fell apart, and he realized even she was stronger than him. The story fast forwards to the next day, and all of them had finally made it to the lake in one piece. But upon looking around, our boy saw the place crawling with many dangerous monsters and even saw a whole pack of deadwood wolves who were responsible for injuring my back in the forest, and the sight only sent shivers down his spine. As he was processing everything, he hears Yankyu telling him that these wolves weren't the real threat in this place, as they could be dealt with easily. The real threat were the rock crocodiles that were living in this lake. Since these rock crocodiles were the absolute rulers of this lake, their dominance was unquestioned. There were more than a dozen of them lurking beneath the surface, and each one wasn't just some random wild beast. They were pure bird monsters, true powerhouses. Even if every single totem warrior in their tribe were to join forces and throw everything they had at them, they'd be lucky to bring down 2. Hearing those words, our boy couldn't help but wonder, how did these people survive for this long living in such conditions, and knew he needed to solve this problem as soon as possible. With that, he starts burning through his brain cells trying to figure everything out. This lake was basically a natural pool, and the surface wasn't too far down either. Most of its water came from rainfall, surface runoff, or underground sources. And if the water had built up during the rainy season, there should have been some signs of evaporation, but there weren't any, which meant one thing. This lake was most likely formed by the surface runoff of groundwater, which meant if they could dig a canal on the lowlands near the lake, they'd be able to redirect the lake's water straight to the tribe, which will solve the entire water shortage without having to rely on risky trips or limited supply. The only thing the rest of them were able to make out of all that was they needed to dig some ditches. Realizing that, Black Fang stepped forward and volunteered, proudly claiming he was the best when it came to digging. But our boy wasn't so quick to cheer. He still remembered the injuries Black Fang sustained while escorting him to see Mei, and that bothered him more. So he turned toward the chief and asked why they always attacked the moment they heard any noise. The chief explained that once they step into the hunting grounds, they are no different from wild animals. It's kill or be killed, especially at night. If the approaching beast has sharper hearing, waiting could mean death. Striking first simply raises their chances of survival, and wounds like those aren't even considered serious. Because out there, it's still better to be cut up from a preemptive strike than to be torn apart and bitten to death by the wild beasts lurking in the hunting grounds. Realizing how much trouble he'd caused for everyone, Subei apologized to the man, but he assures not to think too much about it. At the very least, he'd learned something important today. He couldn't just wander off from the village whenever he liked. By then, Black Fang had already started his digging, which leaves our boy surprised to see how good he was at it. But still, he gave him a 1 out of 10 score since he didn't even listen where they were supposed to dig. Fast forward, they started looking for the plants they needed to create linen, but weren't able to find any. But during their search, Subai couldn't help but notice something about Yanhua, and it genuinely caught him off guard. This was the first time he actually noticed how surprisingly well-proportioned her buttocks was, especially from behind. As he was admiring the view, he suddenly heard Yuan calling out that Black Fang had managed to find some water while digging, which was great news. But that wasn't enough. He wanted them to reach the actual water source, not just shallow runoff. So he calmly instructed her to tell Black Fang to keep looking. But before she could even move, a scream tore through the air from the direction Black Fang was working in. Without hesitation, everyone rushed toward the noise to see what had happened. When they got there, they saw chaos. Some beast had somehow managed to spot Black Fang. Luckily, he'd escaped just in time, but the trenches they had worked so hard to dig had already been taken over by the monsters. Seeing the situation, Subai instructed everyone to head back to the village for now, as if they kept digging in broad daylight, it would only attract more beasts. Hearing him say that, Yinku asked if they were giving up, but Subai shook his head saying he was just slightly altering the plan and asked if there were any bamboo trees nearby, but neither of them knew what bamboo was. So Subai explained that what he was looking for was a kind of plant, tough and sturdy on the outside, but hollow inside. Hearing that, the others tried to think it over, but no such plant came to mind. But Yanwu mentioned a few trees nearby that sounded somewhat similar. They weren't exactly what he described, but they did have hollow cores, which might just work for whatever he was planning. Yank was also curious as to what he needed such trees for, and here's Subai explaining that he wanted to use them to transfer water to their village. Wasting no time, Yank elbows a nearby tree and managed to break it with one attack. Upon checking the tree, Subai saw a hollow cavity running through the hard trunk, smooth and wide enough to transfer water without any issue. It wasn't exactly bamboo, but for their current situation, it was more than enough. He nodded to Yankia, realizing they might have just found the key to solving their water problem. Out of nowhere, they saw Yuan approaching them, saying Black Fang managed to find the water source they were looking for. That was good news. Now all they needed was to lay down a pipe-like system to transfer the water. So Subai instructed Yankio to take this hollow tree to Black Fang. Arriving at the location, he saw a massive hole in the ground filled with clear water. It was perfect. Groundwater was steadily seeping out from below, confirming that this was a natural reservoir. Seeing that, Subai couldn't help but smile. This spot was exactly what he needed. Meanwhile, Yanua, actually using her brain for once, asked the obvious question. If it was really this simple, then why didn't they just dig a hole in the village to get water directly? So Subai explained that these kinds of water sources couldn't be found just anywhere. The location of their village was already a problem. There weren't even many trees growing nearby, which usually meant the land was dry and lifeless. That made the chances of finding groundwater directly beneath the village extremely low. He explained that they will dig a path for the water, use these hollow tree logs to transfer this water from this reservoir to their village where it would be stored. Finally, understanding the full scope of Subai's plan, everyone was left amazed. None of them had ever heard of such a clever way to transfer water before. It was simple, effective, and something they never would have thought of on their own. With everything set in motion, Subai gave the order for everyone to get to work. He specifically instructed Black Fang to cover the pool, making sure it stayed hidden. And until the water line was completed, he and Yanghua would stay behind to guard the area, keeping watch and driving off any beasts that might try to approach and claim the water source. After giving the order, he turned to Yanku and asked him to escort him back to the village. This project was far too big to be completed by just a handful of people. If they wanted it done quickly, they need the help of everyone. He was going to mobilize the entire tribe. Arriving back in the village, he explained everything to the villagers and ordered them to do their best to finish this as soon as possible. After he was done with that, Subai arrived at the site to check up on the progress, where he was met with another problem of connecting these logs together. And if not done properly, water would simply flow out before reaching the village. So after thinking for a bit, he came up with the perfect plan and showed everyone the way of carving these logs in such a way that they would connect perfectly with each other. And as always, he was showered with praises from everyone for coming up with such a genius idea. The story fast forwards 2 days, and all their hard work had finally paid off. The entire village had gathered at the center, eyes wide with disbelief and joy, as a steady stream of clean water flowed through the wooden pipes and into the heart of the tribe. All that cheering caught the attention of our boy and Yiyang, who were in their hut. They could clearly hear the villagers outside thanking Subai for everything he did. Yiyang glanced at him, thanking him for all his hard work, but our boy simply shrugged it off and reminded her that he only gave the direction. It was the villagers' effort and determination that made it all happen. And now the water problem solved, he instructed Yuan to gather up all the villagers. He wanted to add another rule for the tribe. After some time, the entire village gathered outside Subway's place to hear a new rule. Yuing stood before them and clearly announced that from this day forward, everyone was to boil their water before drinking it. But for some reason, the crowd looked confused. None of them seemed to understand the point of it. After all, they had always drunk water straight from the source, and boiling it just seemed like an unnecessary hassle. Seeing their confused faces, Yang explained exactly what Subai had told her, that there were invisible bugs in raw water that could make them sick. So to keep everyone healthy, they had to start boiling it before drinking. But hearing that only made things worse. Most of the villagers were having a hard time accepting it. For people who'd spent their whole lives drinking straight from rivers and lakes, the idea of invisible bugs living in water sounded ridiculous. Some even whispered that it was nonsense, a made-up story to scare them. After all, no one had ever seen these so-called bugs. Even Yank seemed unsure, pointing out that during food shortages, their tribe had eaten bugs before. So the idea that invisible ones in water could be dangerous didn't really make sense to him. Hearing all their doubts, Yueheng didn't know how to respond. Her voice began to shake as she tried to explain. Reminded them of that one case a while ago where someone suddenly got sick with diarrhea, vomiting, and a high fever during the week. And even though no one really figured out why back then, she pointed out that Subri said it was most likely from drinking raw water, but still, no one was convinced. They all stood there waiting for a better explanation, something they could actually believe. Hearing their words, Yuing froze. She wasn't good at arguing to begin with, and now all eyes were on her. If this continued, she wouldn't even be able to convey the sorcerer's words properly. And as is Marco, if she couldn't do something as simple as this, that would bring shame to Subai's name and even disturb the sorcerer's grace. And in the very next instant, her tone shifted completely. She straightened her back and faced the villagers with a firm unwavering gaze, telling all of them to stop making such a fuss. And with a commanding voice, she informed all of them that the sorcerer already expected that some of you wouldn't understand, but he would never do anything to harm this tribe. His words are for their safety. And if they choose to ignore his words and end up falling ill, then they'll have to deal with it themselves. And they better not come blaming the great sorcerer for the consequences of their own choices. That sudden change in her tone actually worked. Everyone was left speechless and agreeing to do whatever the great sorcerer said without making a fuss. After some time, she came back with the good news, and our boy couldn't help but praise her for a job well done. But his thoughts drifted to something heavier. He remembered how this tribe once had over 10,000 people, and now there were barely 100 left. That's why no matter what, he couldn't afford to lose a single one of them. So drinking boiled water was just the first step. After that, he needed to make sure food was stable and hygiene conditions were improved across the village. On top of that, there was also his healing skill. It had to be strengthened as soon as possible to deal with any major injuries or emergencies. As all that was running through his mind, he noticed Yuing quietly laying out a straw bed on the floor, and for some reason that left him confused. He asked what she was doing, and she calmly replied that the bed was for her. And that caught our boy completely off guard as he asked what was she talking about. So the girl explained that Miko must live with the sorcerer at all times. Then she tilted her head and asked if he didn't like that. Our boy had no objections, none at all. But what she didn't know was that he was still a virgin, and, well, it was going to be hard for him in more ways than one. And just the thought of spending a night with a girl like her was enough to give him a nosebleed, and he wondered if he would be able to endure it the whole night. Fast forward, both of them were lying on the ground, and with her so close, sleeping was the last thing going through his head. He finally broke the silence and asked if she really needed to sleep that close. The girl calmly said it was for his own safety, and if someone tried to sneak in, she'd act as bait to buy him time to escape. But little did she know she was the real threat in the room right now. Seeing no other way out, he decided to push away the cursed thoughts circling his brain and focus on sleeping. He had a big day ahead after all, so he did what any desperate man would do. He started counting sheep, but somehow every sheep looked suspiciously like Yanghua and Yuing. 1 Yanghua, 2 Yanghua. And just like that, the innocent sheep multiplied into shapely proportions he was definitely not ready to handle. From 1 Yanghua to 2 Yoyangs and then boom, straight to that well-proportioned ass. He gave up. Man was doomed. He wondered why the hell these thoughts were even surfacing. Was he really that far gone? He cursed his own perverted brain, genuinely disappointed in himself. Glancing at the sleeping girl beside him, he knew there was no way to make her leave now. She looked so peaceful, and that only made it worse. If he slipped up and did something even remotely stupid, it wouldn't just be his problem. She'd be the one ridiculed and looked down on for the rest of her life. With no other options left and his thoughts threatening to spiral again, he pulled out the kitchen knife he got from the system. Not exactly the most comforting tool for what he had in mind. But desperate times, right? If he wanted to increase the proficiency of his healing skill, he needed practice, and with no one around to volunteer, that left only one idiot for the job, himself. With that, he makes a small cut on the tip of his finger and activates his skill to heal the wound himself. Alright, that's the end of the story. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.